Hey folks, Daniel here. Welcome back to the channel. In this episode, I'm going to be recapping my weekend doing Sonoma Raceway for the first time. Now, I've done track days at other tracks, but going to a track for the first time is always a learning experience, and I definitely learned a lot, not only about the track, but some just driving in general. Now, if you're here just to see best lap times or something, you can skip down to the last 2 minutes of this video. I'll have my best lap there. Otherwise, let's talk about that weekend. People will tell you that Sonoma is dangerous.
That's right. I am dangerous.
And I think that's generally agreed upon, honestly, but the best way to deal with that is drive within your limit. You see, going beyond your limits and having a high-speed off-track event will probably put you into one of the many concrete walls nearby, but if you know your limits and take it easy and maybe dial it back 20%, you're probably gonna be just fine. I mean, not all the turns have concrete walls. There are plenty that have some runoff area for you. I highly recommend using a sim to really get used to the track layout and all the turns so you can focus on the limits of your car. And remember though, sim time is not as good as seat time. Now, this was a 3-day event run by the Porsche Club of America Golden Gate region. I only participated in 2 of those days. I like operating with the PCA clubs because, well, there's a lot of familiar faces if you're involved in the clubs. It's all mostly Porsches, which is cool, and they do run a pretty solid event and a pretty safe event. Not only was it a track day for us recreational drivers, but it was also practice and real races for a number of other Porsches. Be sure to check out SP Motorsports' Instagram here. They got some great race footage. Now, driving with Porsche Club of America unfortunately has some tighter rules, which meant that since I didn't have quite enough track days and I'd never been to Sonoma, I was required to go into the beginner group along with an instructor. Now, I definitely don't mind an instructor, especially at a new track. You always need somebody to point out all the good tips and tricks and the danger zones of a track. Super helpful. The beginner group, sometimes I would run into a bit of traffic, but I was really pleased that by midday, my instructor Vince had upgraded me to intermediate and eventually signed me off for solo in that group. Vince was awesome, just like Tony, my last PCA instructor. They sit, they watch, they observe, and they only comment when it's necessary, and they gave some really good tips. Speaking of tips, I did learn a few extra things this time around. I mean, you're always learning something. Even with other, classroom instruction and driving instructors, these few tips haven't really come across my ears yet, or maybe I just wasn't able to hear them, wasn't ready to learn them yet. So here's 4 things that I learned from this weekend. A good driving tip, especially when learning the turns of a new track, was as you enter, position your wheel to carry you through the entire turn all the way to the exit. I never really thought about it like that. Instead of, modifying your steering all throughout the entry, the apex, and the exit, find that position that just takes you on one continuous curve, and then the only time you move the steering wheel is on the exit. That actually was really helpful. Of course, it's not a rule, but it helps you identify better entry points to each turn, and of course, your exits are gonna be better and faster that way. I definitely liked this tip. The second thing was visualizing. This is very useful in all sorts of things, but I just really never thought about doing it at the track. Close your eyes, sit there, visualize yourself driving the track in real time. I mean, if you can visualize it right down to your typical lap times, you're doing a good job. Visualize every element, how much you're turning in, when you're turning in, the apex, the exits, the speeds, the gears that are happening, what it looks like, what the G-forces are like, where is the compression zones for the suspension. If you can think about all those things, you can drive this track so many times around, and when you actually get in the car, you're gonna be that much better. I thought this was an awesome tip. This one, I'm really surprised I never heard. Vince, my instructor, suggested I set my seat to one of the lowest positions. Why? Because it keeps you from looking down at the nose of your car, which is not where you're supposed to look. You're supposed to be eyes up. And if you're sitting low, your eyes are always gonna be up looking ahead. You won't even see the front of your car. Now, I do a pretty good job looking up. It's part of pilot training, which is what I do, and I've worked hard at it with autocross. I'm still maybe only 90% there, looking ahead as much as I should, but the seat tip was a pretty good one. Another thing Vince emphasized to me, which I just never put enough emphasis on myself, was paying more attention to the flag stations and actually communicating with those flag workers. They like to know that you saw what they're trying to say to you. So going on track, acknowledge every station on the way out, and then pay attention to those flags. And if they give you a flag, maybe say a passing flag, acknowledge it if you can so they know that you saw them. Also, once you get that checkered flag and you do that checkered lap out, be sure to wave at all the flag stations. They're gonna be waving at you saying, hey, bye, you're done, please exit the track. So I really appreciated that tip from Vince, and now I'm gonna work even harder at paying attention to those flag stations. Overall, the first day was great. Obviously, I moved into the intermediate group, got signed off for solo, but I did find that the last couple sessions, my times were sort of plateauing. I kept track of my times with the Porsche Track Precision app. When it works, it's great, but sometimes it's just so buggy, I can't even get it to start. It's so weird, but when it works, definitely great. And this time around, I learned something new. If the phone is plugged into Carplay, you're gonna get access to control the Track Precision app right there on your PCM screen, and it's gonna have that green and red progress indicator and lap time showing right there on the PCM screen, so you don't have to look at like a little phone up on your windshield. The second day was all solo because unfortunately Vince had an issue with his tire, so he couldn't be around to give me a few more tips. But that's okay. Solo means I could just focus on driving and get some new instructors. And those instructors were some slightly faster cars. I followed Rudy in his GT3 Touring. And Gabriel in his GT3 RS. They were great instructors. Be careful, of course, when you're following other cars. Just because they're fast doesn't mean they follow great lines, but either way, they really showed me where I could lay down more power in the turns, and I was fairly keeping up with them. It took my plateaued times from like 158, 157 from the day before, all the way down to about 154, all because I could see where they were going faster, and I said, you know what, I can push a little harder in these areas while monitoring my limits. We had a great time. Sometimes I was chasing them, sometimes they were chasing me. Usually they'd walk away in the straights, and sometimes I would catch up in the turns. Overall though, those two were pretty fast. I know Rudy was laying down some 151 times, trying to break into the 140 range. So the big question, did Sonoma feel
dangerous? That's right.
You know, not really. I think it's partially because I prepped really well by doing sim time. I took it easy on the first day, really slowly working my way up until I could find where the safe limits were. The other thing, folks, is traction control. I can't afford to lose this car. All nannies were on, and honestly, they don't interrupt you too much on this car. That's what I like about it. But when they did come on, and it shows in the Track Precision app, I could see where I was pushing the car too hard, and that actually is a great learning tool. It shows you, hey, you can't do that with the car. Now, of course, it's gonna interfere a little early maybe for some pro drivers, but for me, I think it's perfect. I can say there were a couple times in the 2 days that I'm glad the nannies were there, because otherwise she wouldn't be looking so pretty back there. Now remember, I'm no instructor, I'm just sharing my experiences, so you can learn as I learn. Generally, I would say focus on maybe late apexes to some of these turns. It's early apexes that can sometimes get you trouble on the exits, and that's where you're gonna continue into the dirt and then continue possibly into the wall. You don't want that. I would definitely focus these techniques on turn 2, turn 4, and turn 5. And then I would say that you can put a lot more throttle than you expect on compression zones, such as exiting turn 6, the carousel. Also, I found a little bit of compression zone going into turn 4. Otherwise, go neutral in most of those hairpin turns and then throttle out when it's time. Again, a slightly late apex is great. I chose the single apex on both of these turns. And one more time, remember, these are tips from an amateur. Use at your own risk. Overall, I had a ton of fun. It was nice to have the friendly Porsche faces there, met a few new people, and of course, the cat and mouse games on the track are always a blast. That's where I had the most fun for sure. It really helps to be in a group and driving with people that are on similar levels, so there's a little bit of fun and competition. Just remember, dial it back a little bit, especially at Sonoma. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed my little recap of the weekend and you are excited to do your first day at Sonoma, or go back and maybe try some of these tips. You can always find more Porsche content on my channel, so be sure to like, subscribe, and consider hitting the bell to be notified. Thank you so much for watching the Jet Fuel Only channel. Let's see that best lap.